day my brother was sentenced, my mother sat on his side of the courtroom, not mine, his. 18 months in state prison for stealing $634,072 from her. And she couldn't even look at me. I sat 3 rows behind her, next to my attorney, and I watched the back of her head the entire time. She was shaking, she was crying, but not for herself, for him. Nobody tells you that part. You do the right thing, and the person you're protecting doesn't want it, doesn't thank you, hates you for it. But let me start from the beginning before I get into the full story. If you're into stories like this, hit like and subscribe. We drop new ones every single day. I'm 41. My brother, I'll call him Greg, is 47. Our mom, Linda, turned 79 last month. She still lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. Although she had to leave the house she'd been in since 1994. I'll get to that. Our dad passed in 2017 from pancreatic cancer. He left mom around $1 million in liquid assets between his pension payout, life insurance, and their combined retirement accounts. Not wealthy, but enough that she should never have had to worry again. Dad always trusted Greg more with the financial side. Greg was the oldest. He got his real estate license in 2009 and just had this thing about him. Hard to explain. You'd walk out of a conversation with Greg and feel like everything was handled, even if nothing had actually been decided. He was good at that. When Dad got sick, it was Greg who sat with the estate attorney. Greg who got power of attorney. Mom signed it in August 2017, 3 weeks before Dad died. I didn't question it. I was dealing with my own grief, and I trusted my brother. For the next few years, everything seemed normal. Greg handled mom's bills, took her to doctor's appointments, managed her accounts. I was in Portland, visiting every couple months. When I asked about money, Greg always had these smooth, bored answers, like I was wasting his time, even asking. Moved some funds into a higher yield CD, consolidated 2 IRAs to cut fees. She doesn't need that much sitting and checking. It all sounded responsible. Greg was always good at sounding responsible. Then in late 2018, Mom fell, broke her hip getting out of the bathtub. She needed a home health aide for 4 months. Physical therapy, daily care, the whole thing. Insurance covered maybe 60%. Greg told me he was covering the rest out of pocket, and I felt grateful. I Venmoed him $2,000 to help. He said, "Don't worry about it. He had it handled." I'll come back to that, because it matters. What cracked everything open wasn't some dramatic moment with a frozen credit card or a suspicious bank statement. It was a property tax bill. In March 2022, I was visiting Mom for her birthday. She'd left a stack of mail on the kitchen counter, just a pile. Hadn't touched it in 2 weeks. I was helping her go through it while she made coffee in that old Mr. Coffee that's been on her counter since I was in high school. And I picked up an envelope from the Maricopa County Treasurer's office. It was a property tax notice for a duplex on East University Drive in Mesa, assessed to something called Desert Ridge Holdings, LLC. Mom had never owned a duplex. She'd never owned anything in Mesa, and she definitely didn't have an LLC. I asked her about it casually, and she waved her hand. Oh, that's probably Greg's. His mail gets mixed up with mine sometimes. She didn't think twice about it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I took a photo of the tax notice before I put it back in the pile. That night at my hotel, I looked up Desert Ridge Holdings, LLC, on the Arizona Corporation Commission website. Registered agent, Greg. I looked up the Mesa property on Zillow, purchased in 2018 for $189,000. Then I searched the LLC name in county records and found 2 more properties. A 3-bedroom in Temp, purchased 2019, $167,000. A condo in Chandler, purchased 2020, $142,000. My brother had nearly $500,000 in real estate. Greg, who'd been complaining about money for years. Greg, who drove a 2014 Nissan Altima and rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Mesa. Suddenly, he's buying investment properties. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed with my laptop open, just going through county records over and over. Couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., I called a forensic accountant, left a voicemail. Obviously, she called me back at 8 the next morning. Her name was Diane Westbrook, based in Phoenix, specializing in elder financial abuse. That first consultation cost $275. She listened to everything, asked questions I wouldn't have thought to ask, and then said something I still think about constantly. If what you're describing is real, you need to stop talking to your brother about money immediately. Don't ask questions, don't hint, don't confront. Every day he thinks he's getting away with it is a day we can use. So I didn't confront him. I went home to Portland and I smiled. I played dumb. For 3 years, I played dumb. I'm not going to pretend. I handled it well. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every phone call where Greg would casually mention something about Mom's finances, just tossing it out there. Oh yeah, I moved some of her money around. I had to swallow it. My husband, Matt, thought I was losing my mind. He supported me at first, but by year 2, he was frustrated. You're spending thousands on this accountant and this attorney, and you won't tell me what the end game is. We fought about it constantly. There were months where the investigation felt like a third person in our marriage. We went to couples counseling. It helped, but barely. Matt didn't understand why I couldn't just go to the police in 2022 and be done with it. But Diane understood, and our attorney Paul understood. The case had to be airtight because Greg had something going for him that most people who do this kind of thing don't have: a partial justification. Here's what Diane's forensic audit uncovered over those 3 years. Between September 2017 and March 2022, Greg had been pulling money out of Mom's accounts the entire time. $187,400 from her Fidelity IRA, $214,000 from a Vanguard brokerage account Dad had set up, $138,222 from her savings at Wells Fargo, another $94,450 in smaller transfers from her checking account over 5 years. Total $634,072. And here's where Greg's story got complicated, and where I have to be honest about something that made this harder than a clean-cut theft case. Remember Mom's fall in 2018? The home health aide, Greg, said he was paying for out-of-pocket. He was, sort of. He paid $22,600 for Mom's out-of-pocket medical costs that year. But he paid it from her own accounts, not his. He never told her or me that. The $2,000 I sent him, he kept it, but in his mind. And his defense attorney later argued this. He'd been advancing Mom's money for her care and then reimbursing himself from her accounts. The problem is he reimbursed himself about $611,000 more than he was owed, and the reimbursement went into rental properties under his own LLC. And this is what made the whole thing so hard to prosecute. Greg's defense actually had something to work with. His attorney argued it started as legitimate caregiving expenses that blurred over time. Our case had to prove the line between caregiving and theft, which, and I didn't know this before any of it, is way murkier than you'd think. When someone has power of attorney, it wasn't some movie scene where we slammed a folder on the table and the bad guy confessed. It was 18 months of legal arguments about fiduciary duty and authorized versus unauthorized transactions. Paul Esteban, our attorney, was ready for all of it. Short guy, maybe 5'6", but he walked into rooms like he was 6'4". He'd handled dozens of elder financial abuse cases, and he warned me early. The ones with a kernel of truth in the defense are the hardest to win, but we don't need to prove he had no right to touch her money at all. We need to prove he systematically converted it for personal enrichment, and $500,000 in rental properties in his own LLC makes that argument for us. By early 2025, Greg was in the process of buying a fourth property, a fixer-upper in Gilbert, listed at $198,500. Diane said, let him close on it. One more property in the LLC strengthens the pattern. He closed on March 14th, a Friday. I remember because I was refreshing the Maricopa County Recorder's website like 5 times an hour at that point. The following Monday, March 17th, we moved. Paul filed elder financial abuse charges with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. He filed a civil recovery lawsuit against Greg personally and against Desert Ridge Holdings, LLC. A report went to the IRS regarding unreported rental income across 6 tax years, and Adult Protective Services initiated a welfare check. It didn't go the way I'd imagined, not even close. In my head, I'd rehearsed this like 1,000 times. The clean, cold line. I know what you did, Greg. But what actually happened was Greg called Mom first, not me. Mom, he called her crying, saying people were at his door, saying he didn't understand. Could she call her attorney? And Mom called me, panicked, asking what was happening to Greg. I had to tell her over the phone. I said, Mom, Greg has been taking money from your accounts. A lot of money. I've been working with an attorney and a forensic accountant for 3 years. I filed the case. Silence. Just nothing. Worse than anything Greg could have said to me. Then, how could you do this to your brother? That sentence has lived in my chest for a year. I've replayed it in therapy probably 50 times. How could you do this to your brother? Not how could he do this to me? Not thank you for protecting me. How could you do this to your brother? Mom didn't speak to me for 4 months after that phone call. 4 months while the legal proceedings were ramping up. While Diane needed access to more of Mom's records. While Paul was building the criminal case. My mother would not take my calls. She spoke to Greg every single day. She tried to get him a better attorney. She told Paul's office she didn't want to press charges. Paul told me this happens more than people think. The victim almost always sides with the abuser when it's family. It's not because they're stupid, he said. It's because it's their kid. She couldn't process that her firstborn son would steal from her. So she reframed it. He was helping manage things. It got out of hand. He didn't mean for it to go this far. Greg's defense put up a real fight. His attorney framed the early transfers as legitimate caretaking expenses that gradually escalated. He argued Mom had verbally authorized some of the transfers, which we couldn't disprove because verbal authorization is a gray area with power of attorney. But Diane's audit was airtight on the big picture. $634,072 out of Mom's accounts. $498,000 into Desert Ridge Holdings. $22,600 to actual medical expenses. The math didn't lie. You don't verbally authorize someone to buy themselves 4 houses. And that brings us to the moment I told you about at the start. He pled guilty to 2 counts of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, 18 months in state prison, 5 years probation, full restitution ordered. The civil case forced the liquidation of all 4 properties. But here's the thing. You'd think that's where I'd tell you justice was served. It wasn't. Not really. The Mesa duplex had been trashed by tenants who took off when Greg got arrested. Burst pipe, holes in the drywall, an unpaid contractor's lien. It sold for $171,000, not the $247,000 we'd projected. The temp house did okay at $219,000. The Chandler condo was in a complex with a special assessment pending and went for $151,000. The Gilbert fixer-upper, which Greg barely owned for 3 months, sold for $196,000 after legal fees, closing costs, Diane's fees, and Paul's contingency, which totaled about $140,000. Over 3 years, we recovered $491,622 for Mom, not the full $634,072, about $142,000 short. That gap ended up mattering more than anyone expected. Mom had burned through her remaining liquid assets during the 3 years Greg was still draining her accounts, and we were building the case. Her fidelity balance was down to $67,000. She couldn't afford the property taxes and upkeep on the Scottsdale house anymore, the house she'd lived in since 1994, the house where Dad built the patio cover with his own hands, the house where Greg and I grew up. Mom had to sell it. Diane had warned me this was possible back in 2022. If we'd acted then, immediately, we might have preserved more of the liquid assets, even if we recovered fewer properties. But I chose to wait. I chose to let Greg keep going, so the case would be stronger. And the case was stronger. But Mom lost her house. I think about that trade-off every single day, whether it was worth it. I know it was. I think she lives in a one-bedroom apartment in North Scottsdale now. It's nice. It's clean. Sandra, her new fiduciary at a firm Paul recommended, manages everything. Mom is financially stable and will be for the rest of her life. But she lost her house. She says she doesn't blame me for the house, but she visits Greg in prison every month. She writes him letters. She has his photo on her nightstand in the new apartment. She does not have a photo of me. Greg got out after 14 months with good behavior. He's in a studio apartment in Glendale, lost his real estate license permanently, working at an AutoZone, I think, or one of those places. He has a felony record. He's 48 and starting over from zero. He hasn't spoken to me since sentencing. The IRS case is still pending. His estimated liability is around $89,000 in back taxes and penalties on 6 years of unreported rental income. Matt and I are still together, but this thing left marks on us. 3 years of secrecy, of spending our savings on legal fees, of me being emotionally absent while obsessing over county records and Diane's spreadsheets. That doesn't just go away because the case is over. We're in a better place now, but it took real work, couples therapy, individual therapy, a lot of conversations I didn't want to have. And me, I'm just tired. I spent 6 years on this, 3 years knowing and pretending not to. I lost sleep, I lost weight, and at some point in all of it, I lost the version of my family I thought I had. I did everything right, and I still lost something I can't get back. I got Mom's money back, most of it. I put Greg in prison. I protected my mother from a man who was bleeding her dry, and my mother can't look at me. If you're watching this and something feels off about how a family member is handling an elderly parent's finances, trust your gut. Get a forensic accountant. Get an elder abuse attorney. Don't confront the person. Document everything. It will take longer than you think, and the ending won't feel the way you want it to, because here's what I didn't understand going in. You can't have justice and keep your family. Not both. Not with something like this. I chose justice. I think it was the right choice. But the question I actually sit with, the one that keeps me up, isn't, was I wrong to file the case? Of course I wasn't. It's this. If I'd confronted Greg in 2022, the moment I found that property tax bill, maybe he would have stopped. Maybe we'd have recovered less money. But Mom would have kept her house. Maybe she'd still look at me the way she looks at him. Maybe my family would be broken in a smaller way instead of shattered completely. I chose the stronger case over the faster one. I'd make the same choice again. I think, what would you have done?